The Galactic Defense Initiative had selected Kazim-9 for one very specific reason. It was absolutely, categorically, magnificently terrible. A desert planet where the surface temperature could boil unwary recruits in their own carapaces, where dust storms arrived with the regularity of a sadistic drill sergeant, and where the term hospitable was used exclusively in sarcastic after-action reports. The planet existed in that special category of worlds that made military planners smile with malicious glee while recruits questioned their life choices. 57 species participated in the initiative's elite survival training program, each convinced their particular evolutionary advantages would carry them through 10 days of coordinated suffering. The Zenthari brought their thermal regulation and strategic brilliance. The Krevniks offered their engineering prowess and forearmed efficiency. The Almorians contributed their analytical minds and comprehensive medical knowledge. The Dravik added their resilience and combat adaptability. Every species arrived with technological marvels, proud traditions, and absolutely unshakable confidence in their superiority. Then there were the humans, still probationary members of the galactic community, who showed up with enthusiasm and a disturbing lack of proper respect for impossible situations. The other species had learned to tolerate them with the patient condescension usually reserved for enthusiastic children who had not yet learned that fire was hot. Squad Designate Theta 9 had been performing adequately, which in military terms meant they had not yet died horribly. 17 recruits representing 6 species had survived the first 7 days through teamwork, resource management, and the kind of equipment that made primitive civilizations weep with envy. Their atmospheric water synthesis unit could pull moisture from air so dry it made mummies look hydrated. Their solar converters could power a small city. Their emergency rations contained more nutrition than most species' feast days. On the morning of day 8, the water synthesis unit made a sound that technology should never make, something between a wheeze, a death rattle, and a mechanical laugh, then stopped working entirely. "Well," announced Threx, the Krevnik's engineer, after spending 40 minutes elbow-deep in the unit's mechanisms, "we are comprehensively screwed." Lieutenant Krix, the Zenthari squad leader, whose blue-scaled face had gone an alarming shade of grey, attempted to maintain command presence despite obvious dehydration. Defined comprehensively, the moisture extraction coils have crystallized. The nanofilters are corrupted. The power distribution network has developed what I can only describe as electronic gangrene. Threx gestured with 2 of his forearms in defeat. "I would need a fully equipped workshop and 3 days to repair this. We have neither." Ventar, the Almorian medic, consulted his diagnostic equipment with the grim efficiency of someone calculating a funeral budget. "Current hydration levels are critical across the squad. Without water, most of us have 18 hours. Some species considerably less." His 3 eyes swiveled toward the Dravik recruits, who were already showing signs of severe distress. "We need to signal for emergency extraction. That means automatic failure," Krix said, though his conviction was notably absent. Pride warred with survival instinct across his features. "Failure we can recover from," Ventar replied. "Dehydration-induced organ failure is significantly more permanent." The squad had collapsed into various states of miserable acceptance when Corporal James Vickers, the human, stood up with the kind of energy that seemed personally offensive, given the circumstances. "Going for a walk," he announced to no one in particular. "Sit down before you collapse," Krix ordered, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "We will initiate extraction protocols within the hour." "Sure. Back in a bit." The human grabbed several empty containers and wandered away from camp with the casual demeanor of someone going to check their mail rather than walking into a lethal desert. "Should someone stop him?" asked Nira, one of the Xanthori recruits. "Let him go," Threx muttered. "The heat has clearly affected his cognitive functions. Perhaps his death will be quick. Your compassion is overwhelming," Ventar observed dryly, though he made no move to retrieve the human either. They sat in the shade of their emergency shelter, conserving energy and contemplating mortality with the special kind of resignation that came from knowing rescue would arrive too late for dignity, but just in time to document their failures. The Dravik had stopped moving entirely. The Krevniks were barely conscious. Even the hardy Xanthori were displaying worrying symptoms. 2 hours later, when the human returned, he should have been dead. Instead, he was soaking wet, energetic, and carrying containers filled with cloudy liquid. "Found water," Vickers announced, dropping the containers with a thud that startled several recruits back to consciousness. Quite a bit of it, actually. Going to need help carrying it all. 17 pairs of alien eyes stared at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to hallucination-induced confusion. "Impossible," Threx stated flatly. "We scanned this entire region. The nearest water source is 70 kilometers away. Yeah, above ground maybe." The human drank deeply from one container, water dripping down his chin. But underground, different story. Crix attempted to stand, failed, tried again with more success. "Explain." "Now, there is water under the desert. Not far down either, maybe 4 meters. Found a good spot, dug a well, let it fill up." He said this with the casual tone of someone describing routine maintenance rather than accomplishing the supposedly impossible. "Water is not great quality yet, but I am working on that. You dug 4 meters in 2 hours. Nira's voice climbed several octaves into genuine hysteria. "With what equipment?" Vickers held up his hands, displaying fingernails packed with dirt and several bleeding knuckles. "These. Also found some rocks that worked pretty well as digging tools once I sharpened them. Desert pavement is mostly on the surface. Underneath it is just sand and clay. The spectral analysis showed no aquifer in this region," Ventar insisted, consulting his equipment as though it might suddenly reveal different data. "Your spectral whatever probably was not looking deep enough or in the right way. Water collects in underground channels and pockets. You just need to know what to look for." The human began explaining with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. "See those thorny shrubs about 1 kilometer west? Those only grow where their roots can reach water. The rock formations there channel runoff underground. There were animal tracks too, small burrowers, which means water close to surface. Basic stuff." "Basic," Crix repeated with the tone of someone whose entire educational foundation was crumbling. "Want to see it?" Vickers offered. "Bring containers. We will need lots." The aliens followed because the alternative was dying, though their faith in the human's sanity remained questionable. They stumbled and staggered across the desert while Vickers maintained an annoyingly steady pace, pointing out features in the landscape that apparently screamed water here to those primitive enough to listen. The well was exactly as advertised, a hole in the ground, roughly circular, lined with rocks to prevent collapse. Water gleamed at the bottom, seeping through sand with patient inevitability. "How?" Threx began, then stopped because his vocabulary lacked appropriate words. "Dug until I hit wet sand, kept going until water started pooling, reinforced the sides so it would not cave in." Vickers demonstrated the process with hand gestures. "The water table is close here. Just needed to reach it. The water is contaminated," Ventar observed, scanning a sample with his medical equipment. Mineral content is acceptable, but bacterial levels are dangerous. Yeah, that is why I am building filters. The human pointed to an elaborate construction beside the well that looked like something assembled by someone having a mental breakdown. Layers of sand, gravel, and what appeared to be charred plant material were stacked in a container with holes punched in the bottom. Biosand filtration. Sand and gravel trap. Sediment. Charcoal absorbs chemicals and organic compounds. Water passes through slowly, comes out much cleaner. He demonstrated by pouring cloudy well water into the top of his contraption. Several minutes later, noticeably clearer water dripped from the bottom into a waiting container. Charcoal from what source? Threx demanded, his engineering mind wrestling with the primitive yet functional design. Burn some of those desert plants. You want charcoal, you burn organic material in low oxygen. Took a while to get it right. Vickers gestured to a small pit where controlled combustion had occurred. This is basic stuff we learned as children on Earth. This is insane, Neera whispered, though she was staring at the filter with fascination. This is survival. Vickers started filling containers with filtered water, but it is still not great. So we boil it too. He revealed another construction, a solar reflector made from polished metal debris from their crashed supply pods, focused on a dark container. Sun heats this up. Water boils, kills remaining bacteria. Wait for it to cool, then it is safe to drink. Ventar tested the final product with his medical scanner, expecting vindication. Instead, his 3 eyes widened in sequence. This water is cleaner than our synthesized supply was before the unit failed. Synthesized water always tastes weird anyway. Vickers commented, beginning the process of filling every container they had brought. This is real groundwater, filtered through rock and sand for probably thousands of years. Add a little more filtering and boiling, and you get good stuff. The squad members drank with the desperation of people who had accepted death and been granted reprieve. The water tasted like minerals and earth and survival. Several recruits wept openly, which they would later deny with vehement passion. Why does your species know these techniques? Treeks asked after draining his 3rd container. You have advanced technology. You have water synthesis. We did not always have those things. Vickers settled beside his well with proprietary satisfaction. Earth had lots of places with water problems. Deserts, droughts, contamination. People learned to find water, clean water, store water. We got very good at it because the alternative was dying, which is a pretty good motivator. Our species never faced such challenges. Threx admitted, our homeworld has abundant water. When we explored drier planets, we brought technology to synthesize it, which works great until it breaks. Vickers gestured at the well. This is technology too, just older, simpler, harder to break, easier to fix. When your fancy equipment fails, you fall back on methods that have worked for thousands of years. The humans spent the next hour teaching the squad how to maintain the well, how to construct additional filters, how to identify safe water sources. The aliens attempted these techniques with varying degrees of success. The Krevniks, with their engineering aptitude, managed adequate filters after several attempts. The Zenthari demonstrated surprising competence at well maintenance. The Dravik simply drank until their scales regained color and declared humans to be bizarre miracle workers. I cannot dig like you did, Neera admitted after attempting to excavate with her clawed hands and achieving minimal results. My biology is not designed for this. That is fine. Different species, different strengths. Vickers showed her how to improve the filtration system instead, building on Zenthari precision rather than human endurance. Survival is not about being the best at everything. It is about using what you have and learning what you do not know. Over the remaining 2 days of the exercise, the squad thrived in a way that previous training scenarios had not anticipated. They maintained the well, improved the filtration systems, and even constructed a basic aqueduct to bring water closer to camp. Vickers taught them techniques for finding water in various terrains, methods for testing water safety without equipment, and ways to construct emergency shelters using nothing but landscape features and determination. The transformation was remarkable. Threx became obsessed with understanding the principles behind primitive engineering, spending hours analyzing why simple designs often outperformed complex ones. He discovered that the human filter system incorporated fail-safes that their sophisticated equipment lacked. If one layer became contaminated, the others continued functioning. If the entire filter failed, you simply built another one from materials that existed everywhere. Our synthesis unit had 17,000 components. Threx explained to the squad during one evening session, his 4 arms gesturing animatedly. 17,000 potential failure points. The human filter has 6 components, all replaceable within minutes using local materials. The sophistication of our equipment made it fragile. Ventar conducted extensive medical research on hydration efficiency, comparing synthesized water consumption with naturally sourced water. His findings challenged conventional medical wisdom. The minerals in groundwater actually improve hydration rates for most species, he announced after 3 days of testing. Our synthesized water was chemically pure, which we assumed was optimal, but pure water lacks the electrolytes that facilitate cellular absorption. The human instinctively understood this. Not instinct, Vickers corrected. Just experience. Humans who drank only pure water during extreme exertion would sometimes experience hyponatremia, water intoxication from electrolyte depletion. We learned to seek mineral-rich water sources or add minerals back into purified water. Your synthesizers were too efficient. The Dravik recruits, having recovered from their near-death experience, appointed themselves guardians of the well. They established a rotation schedule for maintenance, monitoring water levels with religious dedication. Their leader, a grizzled warrior named Krell, approached Vickers on the 9th day. "On my world we have a saying," Krell began, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of genuine respect. "The warrior who survives is not the strongest or the fastest, but the one who adapts when strength and speed fail. I thought this meant adapting our tactics. You have shown me it means adapting our thinking. For this lesson, human, you have my gratitude and my apology for initially dismissing your capabilities." "No apology needed," Vickers replied. "Everyone underestimates everyone at first. It is what you do after that matters." When the extraction team arrived on day 10, they found a thriving camp with abundant water, healthy recruits, and several engineering projects that had not appeared in any training manual. The commanding officer, a grizzled Zenthari veteran named Commander Zex, surveyed the scene with the expression of someone whose understanding of reality was being forcibly revised. "Explain," he demanded, his voice carrying 30 years of military authority. Lieutenant Critch gestured to the well, the filters, the various primitive but effective constructions. "Our water synthesis unit failed on day 8. Corporal Vickers found underground water, constructed filtration and purification systems using indigenous materials, and taught us techniques from Earth that do not require advanced technology. Commander Zex examined the well with the attention of someone inspecting a bomb that had failed to explode. Our scans indicated no water in this region. The scans were looking for surface water and deep aquifers, Vickers explained. The water table here is shallow but localized. You need to read landscape features, vegetation patterns, and geological indicators. Technology can miss what observation catches. You dug this by hand. It was not a question, but the commander's tone suggested he was hoping for a different answer. Yes, sir, and some rocks that worked as tools once I shaped them. Commander Zex walked the perimeter of the well, examining the construction with growing incredulity. The rocks were placed with deliberate precision, angled to prevent collapse while allowing water seepage. The surrounding area showed signs of extensive work, test holes where the human had searched for the optimal location, discarded rocks that had proven unsuitable, and a sophisticated drainage system that prevented contamination from surface runoff. How did you know where to dig? The commander asked finally. Started with the vegetation, Vickers explained, warming to his subject. Those thorn bushes have tap roots that can reach 15 meters, but they were smaller here, which meant water was closer. The rock formations showed ancient water flow patterns. There were mineral deposits on some stones that only form from repeated water exposure. And the ground had subtle color variations. Darker soil indicates higher moisture content. Took about 40 minutes of walking to find the right spot, then another hour of test holes to confirm. 40 minutes of observation accomplished what our orbital surveys could not, Zex said quietly. This will require significant review of our training protocols. With respect, sir, your surveys probably found the water, but the data interpretation assumed that shallow water tables were insignificant compared to deep aquifers. It is a matter of knowing what matters when your equipment fails. The commander's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on reluctant respect. Your techniques will be documented and analyzed. This should not have been possible. Possible and probable are different things, sir. Just needed different thinking. Back at base, Vickers' primitive survival methods became the subject of intense study. Scientists analyzed his filtration systems with sophisticated equipment and concluded that yes, they worked, despite looking like something assembled by someone having a breakdown. Engineers examined his well construction and admitted that sometimes simplicity outperformed complexity. Medical staff tested his water purification techniques and grudgingly acknowledged that boiling water remained effective across all known biology. The embarrassment rippled through multiple species as they confronted an uncomfortable truth. Their technological advancement had created dangerous blind spots. They had forgotten, or never learned, that survival was not about having the best equipment, but about adapting when equipment failed. The Galactic Defense Initiative convened 17 committees, produced 43 reports, and engaged in 6 months of bureaucratic hand-wringing before concluding that perhaps primitive survival skills deserved inclusion in their training program. The delay was partly due to institutional inertia and partly due to the profound philosophical crisis that came from admitting that Stone Age techniques remained relevant in an era of faster-than-light travel. We are essentially teaching recruits to think like their primitive ancestors, one committee member protested during a particularly heated session. This seems regressive. We are teaching them to survive when their non-primitive technology catastrophically fails, another countered. Which seems practical. The debate raged until Commander Zex, invited to provide field perspective, settled the matter with characteristic bluntness. 17 recruits should have died on Kazim 9. They lived because one human knew how to find water without a scanner. I suggest we teach everyone how to find water without a scanner. The alternative is writing more condolence letters to families which I personally find regressive. The committee approved the curriculum. Vickers received a promotion, a commendation, and a request to develop training programs that would teach advanced civilizations how to survive like primitive ones. He approached the task with characteristic pragmatism, designing courses that respected alien biology while teaching universal principles. Water flows downhill, he told his first class of bemused recruits. This is true on Earth, on Xanthar Prime, on Krevnix Alpha, and on every planet with gravity and liquid water. If you understand this principle, you can predict where water collects. Technology makes finding water easier, but principles make it possible when technology fails. The classes became legendary for their combination of practical skills and philosophical challenges. Recruits learned to construct filtration systems, but also learned why those systems worked. They practiced finding water sources, but also studied the geology and biology that made those sources detectable. They mastered primitive techniques while understanding the sophisticated science underlying them. Squad Theta 9 became minor celebrities, their survival story spreading through the initiative with the speed of juicy gossip. They spoke at recruitment events, participated in training seminars, and endured countless questions about how it felt to be rescued by techniques older than most species' recorded histories. I still cannot dig properly, Neera admitted during one such seminar, displaying her clawed hands to a room full of recruits. But I learned that survival means using your strengths and learning from others. The human showed us that technology is a tool, not a guarantee. Threx, who had become something of an evangelist for primitive engineering, demonstrated bios and filtration to audiences who watched with the fascination usually reserved for mystical revelations. These techniques require no power, no sophisticated materials, no maintenance beyond basic cleaning. They work in conditions where our technology fails catastrophically. The human calls this appropriate technology solutions matched to circumstances rather than maximum sophistication. Ventar incorporated human survival medicine into his medical protocols, documenting techniques for treating dehydration, creating safe drinking water, and assessing environmental hazards without equipment. His manuals became required reading, much to the confusion of species who had never contemplated surviving without their medical scanners. Lieutenant Crix, now Captain Crix, commanded training operations that incorporated both advanced technology and primitive techniques. We teach recruits to think like their ancestors thought, he explained to skeptical superior officers. Before technology, species survived through observation, adaptation, and knowledge passed through generations. Those skills remain valuable. The resistance to these changes was predictable and occasionally amusing. Senior officers complained that teaching primitive survival was beneath the dignity of an advanced military force. Scientists argued that technology had evolved specifically to make such skills obsolete. Bureaucrats worried about the resource allocation required to teach what they considered unnecessary knowledge. Then Squad Delta 4 survived 48 hours in a toxic swamp after their environmental suits failed, using filtration techniques learned from Vickers' curriculum. Squad Gamma 7 located water on an arid moon where their equipment had indicated none existed. Squad Epsilon 2 constructed emergency shelters that outperformed their technological alternatives during an unexpected ice storm. The complaints stopped. The curriculum expanded. Vickers continued teaching with the patient enthusiasm of someone who genuinely could not understand why finding water in a desert was considered remarkable. He trained recruits from dozens of species, adapting Earth techniques to alien physiologies and environmental conditions. Some species took to primitive survival naturally. Others struggled magnificently but learned anyway. The problem with advanced civilizations, he told one struggling class of recruits who could not understand why their equipment had been confiscated, is that you forget how your ancestors survived. Every species here came from somewhere primitive. Your ancestors found water, made fire, built shelter, survived dangers without any technology at all. That knowledge is still valuable, but you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Literally, added Threx, who was demonstrating filter construction with the enthusiasm of a convert. Quite a lot of dirt involved. Years later, when military historians compiled their assessment of the Qasim-9 incident, they struggled with terminology. Some called it the primitive revival, others preferred applied ancestral knowledge. A few simply labeled it that time the human made everyone look stupid by digging a hole. The official designation became the Qasim-9 Survival Methodology Integration, which was bureaucratic enough to satisfy everyone and vague enough to mean nothing. But among recruits, instructors, and veterans who had survived because of techniques learned from a human corporal who knew how to find water, it was simply called Vickers' lesson. The lesson was simple, though accepting it required wounded pride to heal. Survival belonged not to the most advanced but to the most adaptable. Technology could fail, equipment could break. Sophisticated systems could catastrophically malfunction at precisely the worst possible moment. But water would still collect underground, waiting for those primitive enough to search for it. Sand and charcoal would still filter contaminants. Fire would still purify. The ancient techniques would still work because they were based on physics and chemistry rather than functioning equipment. The galaxy had learned something valuable on Qasim-9, though many species would spend years pretending they had known it all along. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution involved getting dirt under your fingernails, reading the landscape like your primitive ancestors, and remembering that survival was humanity's oldest technology. And somewhere in the desert, water still seeped through sand into a human-dug well, waiting for the next squad whose fancy equipment would inevitably fail at the worst possible moment. The galaxy turned, civilizations advanced, and technology grew ever more sophisticated. But the water remained, patient and primitive and utterly indifferent to anyone's sense of superiority.